like we have around 354 participants from all over India. Most of the participants were from Rajasthan, but we had a good number from different states like Assam, Kerala, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and so on. The list is long. So we have planned this webinar since the due to this pandemic scenario, it was the lockdown, and students were unable to go to their classes. Uh, I was interacting with few of my master students and research scholars, MPET students, and there were some problems like they wanted to learn something new, some techniques. So from there, the idea came that let's design a webinar, and I tried to invite the experts from different fields. Some of them were my teachers from whom I have learned different techniques, and whatever I am today is due to them. Some of them were my friends, but I assure you they are the expert of their field. Now, may I request Professor Partha Rai sir, former head Department of Biotechnology, IIT Roorkee. He is chairman of Institutional Biosafety Committee, and his area of interest, he is working on animal biotechnology, molecular endocrinology, stem cell, cancer biology, and therapeutics. He is expert in cell and tissue culture, and he pioneered this facility at Department of Biotechnology, IIT Roorkee. May I request you, sir, to please take on the mic and start the lecture. Professor Partha Rai, sir. Hello. Yes, sir. Sir. Yes, sir. Sir, were you able to hear me? Okay, sir. So, sir, you can just start the lecture. I have announced it. Okay. Not exactly, sir. Okay, okay. So, let me check, sir. Just a minute. Sir, बोल रहे हैं मुझे सुनाई नहीं दे रहा. Audio is not there. Audio is not there. Yes, sir. Sir, sir, maybe the mic is mute. Sir, just a minute. Sir, just a minute. Sir, इधर ही आ जाओ. मैंने mic.
Sir, in the bottom you can see three buttons, no? Like central is for disconnecting, left is for audio, and right is for video. So maybe your left button is muted. Yes, sir. No, you can go back. You can go back. You can go back. Just ensure your phone is.
Yeah. Now I understand.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, what should I go to?
Sir, same process.
I will go back to the screen.
Right,
Yeah.
sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you, and your screen is also visible.
Screen is visible, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now it's okay, Dr. Anjali?
Yes, sir. Perfect. Now you are visible, and we can see the screen, and we all can hear you.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Dr. Anjali. First of all, for the first, I would like to thank Dr. Anjali for an excellent introduction about me. I am not sure if I really deserve them or not. But first of all, I would like to congratulate entire team of Dr. Anjali and her team for this excellent initiative. Because when this pandemic is going on, students are unable to go to classes, and she took such a pain to hold all these meetings and all together. So this is our responsibility as a teachers to impart our whatever we know to the students. So that's what when she approached me with this, and I immediately took it up and I started thinking on it and how to do it. So So I'll be talking today on cell and tissue culture technology. So this is basically a very important area in the area in the recent trends of research on molecular biology and other aspects. So my lecture will be divided into two parts. First, I will talk about the basics of the cell and tissue culture technology, and then I will show you some of the applications that we have in our lab using these cell and tissue culture technologies. So what we really do in our lab. So that will give you an idea how we can manipulate the cell culture technologies for our different experimental procedures, and including what you see as a pandemic nowadays in recent times. Okay, so that is how I will talk about. I will not talk about COVIDs and all, but I will give an idea that what you can do in this process in these cell culture systems using this technology. So I will start with this introduction. So first, if you see the origin of functional cells, we all start our life as in stem cells. So stem cell, as you know, is the first fundamental cell from which different other cell types develops by the process called progenitor cells, which is basically the intermediate cell, which is not differentiated, but it knows its function, that how to what it has to produce. So this is basically a committed cell. So from stem cell we form progenitor cells, and then this cell finally differentiates to a functional cells, which is called the differentiated cell, and the process is called differentiation. So we have stem cells, progenitor cells, and differentiated cells. And as you all know, the differentiated cells usually do not divide. Their next fate is cell death. So they do their function and then they dies out. So these cells are continuously being replaced by a cluster of progenitor cell or the stem cell. This is the life process. Any cells or any organs in our body, they maintain this pattern: stem cells to progenitor cell and then to differentiated cells. So now, when these stem cells, this is a normal process occurs in a cell. Now, these stem cells actually undergo self-renewal and maintain its own population of cells. Progenitor cells also maintain its own progenitor cells by self-renewal process. And you will not see differentiation cell because, as I just now told you, differentiated cells do not divide. So the next step is cell death. So now what happens to each cells at different stages? Stem cell and then the stem cell self-renewal cells. So it is supposed to be stored in the organs or tissues. Whenever there is any need of, when this cell dies out or there is any need of these cells, so these cells will become progenitor cell and then they differentiate. Same thing applicable to progenitor cells. So these cells remains there. So this cell, whenever there is any need of this cell, so they will differentiate to differentiated cells. So this is how it goes on. But every time it does not go like this. Sometimes these stem cells undergoes a mutations, or these mutations are in terms of self-renewal genes gets turned on, and because there is a balance between self-renewal and differentiation. So if this genes gets turned on, this cell starts to divide randomly, and multiple type of cell division occurs, and then ultimately deregulated cell division results in the development of an irregular cell division, which we sometimes say as the cancer stem cell populations or any other cells which are deregulated in their cell divisions. Same thing could happen in the progenitor cells when the cells are there, so they can get mutated and they become malformed. They start to divide, proliferate rapidly, and then they become into a transformed cells or whose cell division process has been lost. And this is quite common. This happens regularly because mutation occurs in different sources by chemical, environmental factors, other factors are there which causes these mutations. But what happens to differentiated cells? These differentiated cells, sometimes they will undergo a process called de-differentiation. That means they loses their differentiation capacity. So they reverts back to their earlier progenitor condition. So this de-differentiation is a reverting back of these cells. That means what happens here? These cells, who was not supposed to divide, they suddenly changes their properties, forgets about what it differentiated to, it starts to divide. And then once it starts to divide, then its fates become quite irrelevant. It can become anything. It can differentiate to the same cells, what it was earlier, or it can differentiate to something else. I will talk about this little bit in the later section of my talk. So this process is called de-differentiation. And if the de-differentiation is very intense, that means cell attains many more mutations, many more changes in the genome, etc. So cell starts to become real self-renewal genes are put on, and then this can also become a cell which will be like a cell which is already like a dividing and mutated or functional cells. Sometimes we call them as the cancer stem cell population. So basically, this is the fate of any cells in the in vitro or in vivo condition. So this is basically in vivo situation this can happen. So if we culture these cells in the in vitro condition, we may see some of these fates in the cells also. So now, why do we need to do these cell and tissue cultures practices? This has got several applications. Number one, production of biopharmaceutical products. That means many of these biopharmaceutical products like erythropoietin, interferon, interleukins, tissue plasminogen activators, monoclonal antibodies, these are produced in the in vitro system and they all needs the culture of cells or animal cells. Culture is required. So these are the very important, one of the important characteristic feature or important application of having the cell culture system. So if you don't have this, you cannot make this. Now, some of these proteins can be made in the bacterial cells also, but you know, bacterial cells does not mimic the exact they do not have post-translational processing. So you may not get all the time, may not get the exact proteins that you really need. So that's why sometimes there is no options other than the culture of animal or mammalian cells for the production of these biopharmaceuticals. Nowadays, one subject is coming up, tissue engineering is coming up, which is used for cell therapy and organ replacement, where we try to make artificial skin, artificial organs, other tissues. And for that, we have to culture the cells in the in vitro condition. That also one of the applications of this tissue engineering or this cell culture is very much critical, where we culture the cells in different matrices. It could be polymeric matrices. It could be any three-dimensional structures where you can use them. And thirdly, in vitro model for pharmacological testing, like where we can test in drugs for their growth rate, wound healing, drug effects, toxicity testing. All this can be done because otherwise, in theory, they are supposed to be done on animal models. But before taking to animal models, it is important that we test them in the in vitro cells outside, so that once we get the response from these cells, we can take them to animals. So by that, we can reduce the number of animal usage in our experiments. So that is why this is a very critical preclinical testing has to be done using the in vitro model. So you can see here, we have a lot of applications of these animal cell culture practices or tissue culture practices, which we can use in different applications. Now, how to get the cells for culture? Now, when I say cell culture or tissue culture, it is important that we need to know where to get it and how to get the cells for culture. Now, there are several companies globally who can do it. American Type Culture Collection is global authority for providing cell lines. They maintain the cell lines. So before I talk about these cell lines, etc., I will talk about how to get these cells from different sources. So now this is a very hallmark picture. So which shows that, say for example, this is a solid tumor model. So what you can see here, this is a solid tumor which consists of different type of cells. It can contain normal cells. It contains some cancerous cells. So like red colored one are cancerous cells, blue colored one are basically the normal cells, and there are blood vessels. And these yellow colored cells are basically the cancer stem cells. So if you take any tumorous samples, you will see this type of features in those cells. So large number of cells will be there. So they are being present in these tissues or in the tumors. So now what you can do is that you can take a tumor out of the patient and then put it in a culture medium and you can culture them. And that culture is called the organotypic culture. So here we are not doing anything. We are just taking the tumors out, solid tumors out, putting in the culture condition, and that's how the tissue is called the organotypic culture. So this is the organ culture. So it is basically whole organ is being cultured. So using this also you can test your drug. So how the organ is responding in response to that particular drug. So this is one sort of applications. So but this is not directly linked to cell culture. So organotypic culture is one sort of culture that we do in a cell and tissue culture process. But what mainly we look for, that we can separate the cells out of this tumor. So how we do it? So if we separate the cells, so you can use some enzymatic treatment. What is that enzymatic treatment is? Like trypsin, collagenase, other enzymes are there, which basically breaks the intercellular bond. This, because the cells in a tumor are held together by intercellular bonds. So if I have some enzymatic treatments, the cells get separated out, and these are all separated cells. Now, so if I take these separated cells out and try to culture them in different modes. How? I can take the culture medium and I can seed the cells there. So you can see the cells are growing in this culture. So these are independent cells. Unlike the whole solid tumor or organ, the cells are being cultured in the culture medium. And we say it as two-dimensional culture. Why it's called two-dimensional culture? because here the cells are growing in only one monolayer, or they can form multiple layer, but there is only two axes, x-axis and y-axis. So they're the only two. So it's two-dimensional culture. So here the cell will generally form a monolayer, means single layer of cells, single lawn of cells. Or otherwise, if I seed these cells in some material which has got 3D structure, like say for example, I can take a sponge. A sponge has lots of pores inside, and if I grow the cells inside the pores of the sponge, so cells will attain a shape like this. So this, or it looks like a 3D culture. Cells are seated on a three-dimensional structure. So this structure is different from this one because it's a two-dimensional culture, and this is called 3D culture. Means the cell needs a scaffolds or a supporting material on which the cells grows, and it mimics almost like an organ. That's why it's called the three-dimensional culture. So this is called the 3D because you can see this structure is almost similar to that of the tumor or the organ-like structure. Also, now this is one. Sometimes, even without using enzymes, we can use some chemicals like EDTA. EDTA is a chelating agent because in any tissues or organs, cells are held together by different enzymes, and sometimes calcium is also very important because calcium actually holds the cells together. So if I use some chelating agent like EDTA, which chelates the calcium, so if they chelate the calcium out, the cells become free. So here I did not use any enzymes, I use the chemicals, and the cells got separated. So these cells also can be cultured. Or we can mechanically separate the cells out, and those cells can also be cultured, either two-dimensional culture or three-dimensional culture. So we can separate the cells by enzymatic method, or chemical method, or mechanical methods, and we can use them for two-dimensional culture or three-dimensional culture. Even sometimes we culture the cells on some in a matrix which is sandwich, because we can have one lower layer and we can have and the upper layer also. This is called sandwich type of cultures are also possible. And other one which I did not talk about still now is basically the explant or cell culture. Explant culture means you take a small piece of solid tumor tissue and then grow them in the culture medium. So this is being cultured in the medium. So you see here we did not separate the cells out. It's just a small piece of this. So this is different from organotopic culture. Organ means a big surge organ is taken out. Here it's a small portion of the organ is taken out, and this is being cultured. What happens to this one? This remains in culture for some time, and sometimes what happens, some of the cells of this explant slowly comes out of this culture, and if they comes out, they become independent cells, and those cells can also be cultured, and that is called the explant culture. So those cells can be grown for a long period of time. So this also is possibility. So this is sometimes people use the explant cell culture for culture of cells also. And then you have another method is there where you can isolate. So when you take this tumor out and you are not interested in other cells, you can pick up only the cancer stem cell population. As you all know, cancer stem cell is basically a very, very small number of cells present in any tumor samples. So those cells are there in a tumor sample, and and sometimes we need to isolate these cells out of the cancer or tumor samples. So there are different markers which are anti-cell surface. Because these cells express some surface markers, and there are specific antibodies which are available commercially. And if you use those antibodies, you can fish out these cells and you can culture those cancer stem cell population. And for each type of cancers, like breast cancer, prostate cancer, brain cancer, all sorts of cancers, there are different types of cancer stem cell populations, so which you can culture. Because these cells are very tricky cells, and they are very clever cells, which are very difficult to kill. So when the tumor gets killed, these cells do not get killed. So there are lots of research is going on now, isolating this cancer stem cell population, understanding their biology, and they are generally drug resistant. So they are chemo resistant. So now we have to understand why they are chemo resistant, how we can prevent the chemo resistance. So that's why many applications needs tumor separation of cancer stem cell population from the tumor samples. It's a very tricky step, but it is possible. You need a cell sorter by using which you can separate the cells out. Now this is all about the cell separation. Now what happens after this? So once we culture these cells in this process, after isolating from these cells from the tissues or organs, what will happen? So most of the time the cells will die out. Most of the cells you will see they'll die out, but some cells will remain in the culture for some time. So they will remain in the culture, and then after they starts to proliferate. They start to proliferate. So once they start to proliferate, the number increases. So you can see here the cell number has expanded. So once we culture these cells in the in vitro condition, we say them as primary culture. So primary culture means the cells taken out from the tissues and organs and they are being cultured in the culture system. So these cells remains there and they may die or they may start to proliferate. They start to proliferate and expand in number. So their number start to increase. Once the number starts to increase, then once the plate gets full, we transfer these cells to another new culture flask. And that's how we continue the culturing these cells. And that's what we say subculturing or passaging. I'll talk about that in the later part of my talk. So that's how we can continue culturing these cells. So this is called the primary culture, and this is the expanding tumor cells or the expanding primary culture. So we are still now not calling them as cell line. We are calling them as just primary culture of cells. That means cells are allowed to proliferate and get propagated in the culture flask or in a petri dish. Now, when we do this type of things, so when you culture these cells, there are two types of cell culture process. One, some of the cells, once you isolate these cells, as I showed you, the cells are isolated out. So depending on the tumor's tissues, what we have used, the tissues or the organs from where the cell has been collected, the cells will be of two types. They will either adhere to the matrix or the surface of the petri dish, or they will remain suspended or free. So that's what's shown over here. So you can see this is a group of cells. We call the cells into two categories: anchorage dependent cells or anchorage independent type of cells. So who are anchorage dependent cells? The cells that needs to attach to the matrix surface are called the anchorage dependent cells. Cell lines derived from normal tissues are considered as anchorage dependent, grows only on suitable substrate. That is, cells are cut from tissues or other organs, because as you all know, if you imagine a tissue, liver, heart, kidney, whatever you see, all the cells are adhered together to each other. So cells have a tendency to remain adhered together, and also they remain adhered to the basement matrix, basal lamina outside, to which they remain adhered. That is called the matrix. So these cells, by inherent property, to remain adhered to the matrix. So if I isolate any cells from liver, heart, kidney, lungs, any such organs or tissues, and I want to culture them in the in vitro condition, I have to provide them as matrix or surface on which they will grow. These cells will never grow without any matrix or any surface. So you can see this is called the adherent cell lines. Adherent cell means the cell lines which needs a matrix to grow on its surface. While some cells you will see they will remain as a non-adherent, or they will not adhere to any matrix. They will remain floating in the culture. So who are those cells? So there are some cells in our body which never adheres, like blood cells, RBC, WBC, platelets, that they do never adhere to any matrix. They just remain floating in the blood. So if I try to isolate I culture the blood cells, say for example, as I shown here, U937 cell line is a pro-monocytic cell line. If I try to culture this cell line, so this cell line, if I try to culture, so this cell will never adhere to the matrix. It will remain in the suspended form. So this is called anchorage independent cells. So based on seeing the property of the cells in the culture condition, you can say whether it is an adherent cells or it's a non-adherent cells, or it's anchorage dependent or anchorage independent. So any blood cells will be all the time, whenever you culture them in the in vitro condition, they will be always suspended cells called suspension culture, or they are called independent, anchorage independent cultures. While other cells, like as I have shown here is a picture of HeLa cell line. HeLa is basically a cervical cancer cell line. So cervical cancer cell lines are basically from the cervix tissues, and it's an organ, and where the cells are adhered to each other, so they will be adherent dependent cells will be there. So this is broadly we're classifying the cells, culture of cells in the in vitro condition into two types. One, anchorage dependent and anchorage independent. Anchorage dependent cells are those cells who are from the organs or tissues, and anchorage independent cells are those cells which are generally in the free floating conditions. That means the cells, when cultured outside, they tries to maintain the same in vitro situation or in vivo situation even when they are cultured outside. And they will attain, as you all know, whenever you see the suspended cells or non-adherent cells, so they will be spherical in shape, while these cells will have a distinct shape. Adherent cells will have a distinct shapes when they adhere to the matrix. So basically, adherent cells will grow attached or adhered to the matrix, while suspension cells are free floating in culture. Cell growth is dependent on available space, and cell growth is dependent on nutrient availability and waste product accumulation. So that means this very important point here, like when we try to culture these cells proliferation will stop whenever this space gets full. That means when these cells complete their one monolayer is formed, these spaces are full, the cell stops dividing. While in this case, the cells continues to divide until the media nutrients available in the culture medium and the waste products accumulation is not there. So once the waste products start to accumulate, the cells stops to divide, and then they starts to die out. And cells generally will have a specific shape in culture, but cells generally are spherical in shape in the culture. Very important features of these two cells. So they generally have a specific shapes, and while these will not have any shapes. Now, when you culture these cells in the culture in the in vitro conditions, so we use different plastic bags are required. So these are different type of plastic bags that we use when we culture these cells. These are called the T flasks. T flask means their shape is somewhat like this. So this has a vented caps on it, and they comes in different sizes. So based on your number of cells that you use, so this is the red color that you see is filled up is basically culture medium, which is contained in this culture flask. And these are vented caps where through which the cells are there. So cells will respire. So they also release carbon dioxide and takes oxygen. So those are taken care by the vented caps. Sometimes we culture the cells in the petri dishes. So there are different sizes. If you need more number of cells, this is 100 mm petri dish. This is a smaller one. This is much smaller one. So you can culture these cells here. And these are different plates. This is 96 well plates. This is 12 well plates. This is 6 well plates, 12 well plates, and this is 24 well plates. So you can culture the cells in these culture plates, and they are all they are non-reusable. Generally, after using these cells one time, because cell culture is very sterile conditions are required. So once we use them, we discard them out. That is why it's very critical that you select the right culture flask for your culture of cells. Now, what is there in the cell culture laboratory? So, say for example, after you want to set up a cell culture laboratory, what you really need in the cell culture laboratory? So, let's look at it as cell culture facility. So, this is basically a typical cell culture facility, and basically, this facility has to be highly sterile. It cannot have any contamination like this. It has to be very clean and dust-proof, and it has to be in a sterile environment situation. But it needs several instruments. So, this is basically a laminar hood or a biosafety hood under which you will make all the operations in the culture in the cell cultures. And this is what you see here is basically a CO2 incubator. So cells are cultured or cultured cells are kept inside this incubator. So this provides the required moisture, temperature, and humidity, and also the gaseous conditions to these cells. Because as you all know, when you take a human cell from human cell outside and try to culture them in the in vitro condition, it needs 37-degree temperature. It needs 95% humidity. It needs oxygen for its survival. And this CO2 incubator provides all these conditions. It gives temperature, it gives humidity, it gives the gaseous conditions to these cells. Other than that, your cell culture facility need to have centrifuge, you need to have some microscope, you need to have deep freezers and all these things. But this is a very sterile environment, so it should be free of any contamination. So entry has to be restricted in these cell culture conditions. Now, if I see the inside view of these cell culture conditions, so this is basically inside a laminar hood that you see inside. So here, this person is working inside, and this is how this is the tips over here, and then this is the culture flask. This is the 96 well plates. And one important thing in this culture is that you will never crisscross your hands inside the laminar hood. So this is very important, critical. So whatever you put in, whatever you have to add in this culture flask, they will be on the right hand side, and other things will be on the left hand side. So you will never crisscross your hands while using this hood, because this is a very important condition. Otherwise, you will contaminate your cells in the culture conditions. So this is what you have to be very careful while using these hoods. Now coming to the culture of adherent cells. So if you see after when you culture the adherent cells, as I just now told you in my previous slides, that when you culture these adherent cells, the cells attain different shapes, and any adherent cells will have distinct shapes. So based on that, generally there are 4 distinct cell shapes that we find in the culture conditions. So this is one: fibroblastic shapes, epithelial-like shapes, we have the endothelial-like shapes, and we have neuronal-like cells. So fibroblastic cells are there, which are long, elongated. You can see they have long tail-like structures. While if you say epithelial, they'll be more roundish in shape, more like a star-like shape in appearance, epithelial cells. And then when you see the endothelial cells, their shape is in between fibroblastic and epithelial cells. So they will be not elongated, not spherical, but it will be a little bit more elongated as compared to this, not as elongated as this one. And spherical, it will be more, it is spherical, but not as spherical as this one. So they will have a distinct, little bit larger spherical type of shapes with some projections. And neuronal cells are very easy to understand because they will have a long projections. So they can have this because of this exon dendritic projections are there. So they will have neuronal projections are there. So whenever you see any type of cells like this, you have to make out they are basically the neuronal cells. So these are the 4 different cell shapes that we have. So based on this, so if you see any cell of these shapes, so you have to understand that this is basically endothelial in origin. If you see any cells of these shapes, you have to understand epithelial in origin. So epithelial such like HeLa cell, basically an cervix epithelial cell line. Similarly, fibroblastic cells are MRC5 is basically fibroblastic cells. So we have different such cell types, and we can use them for different applications. So 4 different distinct patterns. Now, when you culture these cells, so we have basic culture environments are required. So what are the culture environments required? Number 1, nature of substrates or phase. It could be solid, liquid, or semi-solid. That means the culture environment means culture medium. So generally we use the liquid culture medium or sometimes semi-solid. Solid one we generally rarely use for culture of animal cells, but yes, some applications definitely there where we culture the cells in the solid phase also. But most commonly it's a liquid culture medium that we use, or sometimes we use semi-solid, which will be jelly-like materials for the culture of cells also are used. And for the culture of cells, we need a physiochemical and physiological constitution is required. That means your culture medium should have an optimum pH, optimum temperature, osmolarity, salt concentration, buffering. All these things are extremely critical for your culture medium. So you have to maintain proper osmolarity. The viscosity has to be there. If you change those, so that will impact the cells that is being cultured in that particular condition. Then gaseous phase is very critical because our cells in our body, they needs oxygen and they gives out carbon dioxide. So when you culture the cells in a culture medium, the culture medium should also contain those factors. That means our medium should be enriched with oxygen, and media also contain a small proportion of carbon dioxide also, because carbon dioxide is required for maintaining the pH of the culture medium, because otherwise the media tends to become alkaline and CO2 brings it back to the acidic condition. That means it's in a neutral condition. So gas phase is very critical. And of course, temperature has to be there. So if you are using a human cell line, 37 degree temperature. If you are using a bird cell line, 38.5 degree temperature. If you are using an testicular Leydig cell line, as you know, Leydig cell has got a lower temperature, so it will come down to say 32, 33 degree temperature. So based on the source of the cells which you are culturing, so your temperature has to be fixed in the culture medium or in the culture condition. So that is what you have to take care, that you give a proper condition to these cells. Now, when you grow these cells in the culture condition, so cells first is adhere to the matrix. The cell adhere to the matrix as well as cell attached to each other. So there are 2 types of adhesion of the cells in the in vitro culture. One, cell-cell adhesion and cell matrix adhesion. So this is also there in the in vivo situation. When you grow the cells in the in vivo condition, they also have cell-cell interaction and cell matrix interactions. So what are these properties are there? So this is what is shown over here. So this is basically a picture showing that 2 cells, this is cell 1 and this is cell 2, and these 2 cells are held on a matrix surface. This is a matrix surface on which this cell is growing. Now, you see there are 2 types of contacts. One, cell-cell communication, and there is cell matrix communication. This is the matrix or surface on which this cell is growing. In the in vivo condition, we have a basal matrix layer, basal lamina, other layers are there which hold the cell on the matrix. And the in vitro condition, it is basically the surface of the culture plate or culture flask provides this matrix surface on which the cells will adhere. And other than that, the cell remain attached to each other. As you all know, there are tight junctions, there are gap junctions, and intricate other proteins are there which hold the cells together by cell attachment, and otherwise the cell remain attached to the matrix surfaces. So matrix surface attachment is through a protein called integrin. So this is basically integrin protein is there through which the cell remains adhered to the matrix. So this is how this is basically a cell matrix interaction is seen over here. So This is here you can see this is cell membrane here. This is cell membrane, and uh, you can see this is the cellular internal part of the cells, and then this is the integrin protein dimer, and this is on the cell membrane, and now this is on the cell surface or matrix on which it is adhering. So they have fibronectin and collagen. In the in vivo condition, our extracellular matrix contains fibronectin, collagen, etc., through which the cells may attach to some point. So in the in vitro condition, our plate surface or the matrix surface will have this fibronectin, collagen, etc. There is a cell surface, and once the integrin protein dimers interact with these matrix proteins, and then they through an adapter proteins and actin filaments, they form say distinct shape. That's why when the cell adhere to a matrix, they have distinct shapes because actin filaments and spreads and then give a distinct shape to the cell, and cell remain adhere and attain a distinct shape. Now, since this does not happen in case of the non-adherent cells, so you don't see any shapes in the cells. So in in a simple way, this is extracellular matrix surface. This is your cell, and this is a cell surface protein, integrin, etc. And after this adhesion, so they adhere to the matrix, and that's how they adhere, and then they attain say particular shapes. That is why the pattern of adhesion of the cells to the matrix determines its shape, how it will happen in the cells when they are being cultured in the in vitro condition. Now, this cell culture needs knowing of several technologies or terminologies that we use for culture of cells. Some of them you are already familiar now. One is primary cell culture. So just now I told you, cells isolated from a tissue to form a primary culture that proliferate in vitro, forming a confluent monolayer or a dense cell suspension. That means soon after the collection of cells from a tissue and organ, then you put it on culture plate and allow them to proliferate. So they will continue to proliferate, and once they continue to proliferate, the population of cell is produced, and that's called the primary cell culture. Now that is complete primary cell culture. Now once the plate is full of these cells, now once I take these cells out of this culture flask and then I put them in another culture flask, and then I continue to grow them continuously. From this process, we say it as cell line. So cell line is basically originating from the primary cell culture. So primary cell culture, when seeded into a new culture flask, and then they continue to proliferate multiple times, and we continue to subculture them several times, we say them as cell lines. So this is how the cell line originates. So these cell lines, if it is collected from a normal tissue, they will have a finite lifespan, because normal tissues in our body, any organs in our body, what will happen? There are some cells do their function, differentiated cells do their function, and then they dies out. But this is the normal function. That's why they dies out. So now when I take such an organ out, isolate the cells, try to culture them in the in vitro condition, so these cells will grow for some time, but because of the inherent property of dying out, they will die out after some time. So that is the finite cell lifespan of the cell. So they have a finite lifespan. But sometimes if these cells, while being cultured, they attain some genetic changes, etc., or they get transformed, or if I collect some tumor cells from the tumor tissues or tumor cell line cells and try to culture them, they have a long lifespan in the culture. So they will remain in the long term in the culture, and in other words, we say them as continuous or infinite cell lines. So generally, the cancer cell lines are said to be infinite cell lines, and the cells collected from the normal tissues are called the finite cell lines because they have a finite lifespan, while the cancerous cells have an infinite lifespan. So they continue to live for a much longer period of time. So a population of cells that has undergone a genetic transformations resulting in infinite growth potential, they are known as the continuous or infinite cell lines. Generally, cancer cell lines are called infinite cell lines, while the normal cells from normal tissues, they are called the finite cell lines because they live for a long time. And it's very difficult to culture these normal cells also. You have to remember one thing, they do not grow so easily. Say, for example, MCF7 is a breast cancer cell line, and this is a cancerous cell line, infinite cell line. But MCF10A is again from the breast cells, epithelial cells, but this is a normal cell line. So their properties are same, but one is finite and there is infinite, although they are from the both from the breast epithelial cells. So that is how the cells are defined into two types, finite cells and infinite cell lines. Finite cell lines and infinite cell lines. And then we have the cell confluency. Cell confluency means, so the ratio of area occupied by the cells and the total area available. What is that? That means when you culture the cells in the in vitro condition, especially for the adherent cells, we use a term called cell confluency. What is that? Say, for example, I am culturing some cells here. This is a culture of cells, as you can see here. So this is basically a RIN5. This is rat insulin islet tumor cell line. This is RIN5 cells, insulin secreting cells. So you can see the cell number is less here. So we say it as low density cell. That means cell number is very low. So cell number is low means, so there are lots of space in between. There are lots of spaces that you can see in between. But once we see these cells here, so if you see these cells, after some time, these cells has divided, proliferated, and they made a large number of cell population here. So number of cells is much higher as compared to here. So now you see this empty space that was there here in this condition, low density, is very, very less here now. So it is now high density population, so space is less. So if I compare a ratio between the number of cells present as compared to the empty space here, which will be much less here as compared to this condition. Here the ratio between the number of cells and the space available is much higher. So if I say this is 20%, 30% confluent, I would say this is 70 to 80% confluency. So confluency is basically a ratio between the number of cells present and the space available. So that is how we calculate. So here it is 80% confluent. That means 80% of the space is occupied by the cells, while it is only 20% of the space is occupied by the cells. So the number that indicates that how much population of cells are there in a fixed amount of space. Now, when you try to generate the cell lines, so I have already given you a glimpse of it. So if we take an organ, say for example brain, we take the cells out of it, the cells are separated out and the cells are cultured, but cells can be isolated out by enzymatic separation or mechanical separation. Cells are separated out and then they're cultured. When the cultured cells starts to proliferate, these cells become confluent, become more in number in population, and this is called the primary culture. Now, once I take these cells out from here and then I put them in a fresh culture because their space is already full, there is no more space for the cells to grow. So now I put in a new culture flask and try to culture them, secondary culture or primary culture, and then I try to continue to culture them for several times. Once this plate gets filled, I transfer to another plate. This plate gets filled, I give it to another plate, and this continues. This is called the subculturing of cells, means culturing of cells continuously over the period of time, and then finally we end up in getting a cell division continues, and then finally we get a cell division continues up to finite cell divisions, and we get a cell line population. This is basically a cell line. Now, this is basically this tissue. This cell was collected from a normal organ. We can do the same thing by collecting them from the tumor. If there's a tumor on the same tissues, I collect the cells out, and these are basically the transformed cells, and I continue to subculture them, and I can get a cell line, which will probably an indefinite cell division. This is an infinite cell line, and this is basically a finite cell line. So based on from where you collected the cells, if it's from normal tissue, normal organ, it will be a finite cell line. If you collect it from an organ having a tumor, etc., it will be an infinite or indefinite cell line. So that this cell line, getting this cell line is much easier as compared to getting the normal cell line, because this cell has inherent property not to divide, but this cell has got an inherent property because they're transformed. They have an inherent property to divide, and then they continue to grow much faster and populate the cells. Then in the biology of cells, we have two very important critical factors over here. So when you talk about the cells in the in vitro or in vivo, there are two important factors. One is contact inhibition, and that is the density dependent inhibition. So what are these two terms? So contact inhibition means, so you see here, there are only few cells that is growing in a culture flask. So this is the culture flask and cells are growing. Now when this cell starts to divide, they divide continuously, and when they divides here, they form a layer of cells, and after some time, when this plate is full completely, there is no more space in between, the cell addition is reached, cell addition is complete, the cell division stops. So this is called the contact inhibition. It means there is no more further space for contact between the cells to each other. So that's why called the contact inhibition is there. So in normal cells, normal tissues maintained and contact inhibition, cell division will not proceed beyond this point of time. But in this case, when cells are transformed, means cancerous cells. So they have an inherent property of dividing. So cell proliferate, and then once they proliferate and continues to proliferate. So you can see here, even after the monolayer is formed, the cell continues to divide further, and then they continue. So it's a disrupted cell additions, and then the cells continue to proliferate. So this is called a loss of contact inhibition. That means here, these cancerous cells do not follow the contact inhibition. Rather, there is no contact inhibition. That's why they continue to proliferate. And that's what we have seen in the cancerous condition also. Cells make a tumor. When the tumors ruptures out, cells get metastasized and travels to other faraway places. So that is how you can see the properties of cells in the culture conditions. And this is what another process is density dependent inhibition. So in each conditions, the cells can grow to certain extent for a certain point of time, and then after some, when the cell population has reached to certain density, after that there is no more cell population is there. It will stop. But in cancerous cells, cell continues to proliferate multiple layers and multiple times. So density of the cell is not critical in any tissues or organs. So in the cancerous conditions, cells do not follow density dependent inhibition or loss of contact inhibition, while normal cells follows contact inhibition as well as they follows a density dependent inhibition. Two important features which are follow the normal cells in the in vivo condition as well as in the in vitro conditions. So if I follow a normal cells, they will always grow in a monolayer. If I try to culture an transform cell or cancerous cell, they may form multiple layers also in the in vitro condition also. Now, when you isolate the cells, I am showing you typically what we do. So we have tried to culture some of the HUVEC cells. HUVEC cells basically human vascular endothelial cells. It's basically a cell which gives us some cells which are basically very early condition cells which can be differentiated to different other cell types. So this is the umbilical cord of human being. You make a small pinch out of it, and then you keep on washing the cells from inside, and then you collect the cells from inside of this one and put them in the culture flask. So these cells are collected from here. Now, once we collect the cells, so what we see, so this is basically what we did in our lab. So this is basically the cells after 2 days. So we put these cells collected from the umbilical cord of human, and these cells are there. This is a 50x magnification. This is what is 200x magnification. You can see the cells are starting to grow. Now, so this is the population that we see here. So these are different magnification that you can see, 100, 400x. You can see. Now, after 4 days, you see these cells has proliferated and they have become much more full. Confluency is high, cell plate is full, and if you can see the cells are, as you can magnified form, you can see this bubble shaped cell. This is a very peculiar shape of these cells, cell for the HUVEC cells. So these cells are isolated. So now, what happens in cell culture experiments? Isolating of cell is not enough. After this, what you have to do is that after the cells are cultured and obtained, you have to characterize the cells to show, okay, if I am saying this is a HUVEC cell, how do I say this is a HUVEC cell? I have to show it. How do I show it? So you have to do an karyotyping. So karyotyping means counting number of chromosomes. If I say human cells, so it should have 23 pairs of chromosomes. So you can see here, so it was from the HUVEC cell, so the 23 pairs of chromosomes could be seen. So that means it's a normal human cells. Next question is, does it expresses the cell genes or proteins expressed by the normal HUVEC cells or cells? You can see here, HUVEC cells expresses CD31, VWF proteins are expressed. So what we could see in the HUVEC cells, you can see this protein was expressed. In HUVEC cells, this protein was expressed, but this was absent in other cell types that we tested. So that means the cell line that you isolated, they are the real specific HUVEC cells that we have isolated. They are not the other cells. And beta-actin is a housekeeping gene that you have to test that is there in all the cells. So that's what showed that we have isolated true cells. And also, these HUVEC cells expresses VEGF. So this is basically an immunofluorescence showing the expression of VEGF. You can see the expression of VEGF in the cells. So our cells showed expression of VEGF. So all this confirmed karyotyping, expression of genes, expression of proteins also showed that these cells we are isolated. They're basically the cells, HUVEC cells. So we have characterized it out, and now we can use it for different experimental conditions. So once you isolate the cells, you have to show all these parameters to show that the cell that you isolated is the real cell that you are talking about. Now, one important thing in this aspect is the cryopreservation of cells. So when you isolate the cells, it is important that we have to preserve the cells, for future use also. So once we got the cells, HUVEC cells, we have to use them and we have to preserve them also. Now, when you preserve the cells, it is critical that we slowly freeze them, and generally we use the liquid nitrogen tanks for the storing where the temperature is minus 196 degree centigrade. So now if I take the cells from the culture which is 37 degree centigrade temperature, and now we are gradually bringing it to 196 degree centigrade temperature liquid nitrogen tank. Now you cannot do it so fast. It has to be done in a gradual process. Why do it in a gradual process? In presence of a cryopreservant that is DMSO. So in the culture medium, we add DMSO. What DMSO does? DMSO actually helps the lowering the freezing temperature. So as you gradually lower the temperature by 1 degree centigrade per minute, so what will happen? So these are the water molecules in the cell. So now what will happen? As you gradually lower the temperature, this water molecule slowly comes out of the cell. So Now, as a result of it, the cell becomes much more dehydrated, squeezed conditions. Now, this is the condition in which we store the cells in liquid nitrogen tank. If we store the cells, if you cool the cells very fast, what will happen? So all these water molecules will be there inside the cell, and these water molecules, because of the cold temperature at 196 temperature, they will form the ice crystals. So the ice crystals will remain inside the cell, and they will rupture the cell membrane, and they will in a turn will kill the cells. So what is required is that you, while cryopreserving the cells, you cool the cells gradually in a gradual process, so that the water molecules comes down out of the cells become dehydrated, and then if you preserve it out, these water crystals are formed outside. Cell remain dehydrated, no matter at all. So, but you're saving the cells because these water molecules are coming out of the cells. So water crystal is outside. So this damage is much less as compared to this damage. So when you cryopreserve the cell, you slowly lower the temperature down 1 degree centigrade per minute gradually, and then bring it to liquid nitrogen temperature as minus 196 degrees temperature, and then you store them out for the future use. Now, when you see the cells in the culture conditions, so there are, as I told you previously also, that there are different phenomena takes place in the cell that is called cellular differentiation. So we have stem cells, and then stem cell undergo progenitor cells, and then they are becoming the terminal differentiated cells. So now this is basically differentiated cells, which I told you that you do not divide. So these cells do not divide cells. So they die after some point of time. Now, when you have, sometimes what is happening here, these differentiated cells become reversible cells, become progenitor cells, and then progenitor cells sometimes become stem cells. And this is basically a process which is called the de-differentiation process, where the cell loses its characteristic feature and it comes to a new situation. That is called the reversible or reverse going back of the cells. So what is that? Say, for example, you have a group of sarcomere muscle cells, and then these muscle cells, so this is expressing sarcomeric genes. These sarcomeric genes, which are differentiated characteristic feature, will go away, and this cell who was differentiated is not dividing earlier, now it starts to divide. It will start to divide. So once it starts to divide, that means it has lost its sarcomeric properties. Sarcomeric genes expression is less, very much less here, and now it becomes, so it's now after some point of time, it may re-differentiate back to sarcomere. So once it re-differentiates sarcomeres, so it starts to express the sarcomeric genes back. So this is what is expected. Sometimes these cells do not go back to sarcomere, but it goes back to something else, which we say as the process of transdifferentiation. This also occurs in the in vitro condition. In vivo also we have, in the in vitro condition we have. So this is called the cell cycle. So if I see sarcomeric gene, which was very high expression here, then it goes down in this condition, then again come back. And if I see cell proliferation, which was minimum at this condition, as I told you, a differentiated cell do not divide, then this division property comes back, high different division here, then it goes down in the differentiation process. So cell division drops down and becomes differentiated. This is the cycle of differentiation or cell de-differentiation. This is called the de-differentiation process of the cells. Now, so this is what is the fate of an de-differentiated cells? So this is differentiated cells. Now it can go back to an undifferentiated conditions by the process called de-differentiation. Now it can have different fates. It can undergo cell death. It can die out. It can enter into a cell cycle. Repeatedly it can divide. It can transdifferentiate to something else which it was not earlier, or it can differentiate back to its original form. This is redifferentiation. So it can undergo redifferentiation, or it can undergo transdifferentiation also, and also it can continue to cell death. Or if nothing of these three happens, it can continue to undergo cell division, repeatedly cell divisions. It can continue, and it can maintain a stem cell-like property, and then it can have any other fates. So these differentiation cells can have multiple fates. In vitro condition, the cells also undergo de-differentiation. You have to be careful that your stem cells or your cell culture do not undergo de-differentiation, because after de-differentiation, if it goes back to this is fine. If they transdifferentiate, or this cell death occurs, or they can enter cell cycle, then your whole cell culture process is lost. So you have to be very careful that in the in vitro condition, your cells do not differentiate. Now coming to the next part of it is the medium constituents. What is the medium in the cell culture? So in the medium that we use for cell culture is glucose. Glucose is basically a source of carbon in the culture medium. Your medium should contain oxygen, which is the atmospheric oxygen. One important constituent of medium is glutamine. Glutamine is basically a source of carbon by oxidation to glutamate. And glutamine, as you all know, is an amino acid. and it is basically unstable in media. Therefore, we use glutamyl glycine, a diamine acid molecule, or glutamyl alanine, which is more stable as compared to glutamine. And I just now talk about why glutamine is used. And this is with fetal cup serum we use. This is basically serum which is used for culture of animal cells, and there are definitely inorganic salts, which is very important for sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. A cluster of or inorganic salts are there in the culture medium, which is major constituent of this culture medium. So these 5 components are extremely critical for the culture of cells. So this is basically, you can see the animal cell culture media is there, and you can see it is reddish in color because it contains phenol red. And phenol red is basically added to for the pH change. But remember one thing, phenol red has got an estrogenic property. Estrogen is a female hormone. So if you are testing any material where the cell might respond to estrogenic chemical testing you are doing, you should use a phenol red premedia because phenol red has got an estrogen-like property. It will behave as it is an estrogenic chemical. And when you use this media, you can use generally sterilized by filtration through 0.45 micron filters, and then because you will not autoclave or sterilize this out because its constituents will get degraded out. So you for filtration process, filtration is the most important process of sterilization of the media. You will never autoclave it or never heat it too much because all its constituents will go down or it get destroyed by this process. So it should be generally by the filtration, sterile filtration is done. And when you use a serum is basically important factor in the culture medium. As you all know, it is a constituent of the blood, and it contains several growth factors, aids cell attachment, binds neutralize toxins, a long history of use. But it has got several risks also because it can bring infectious agent because it is coming from different animals. It is from fetal cough serum or bovine serum from the cow. We collect it out, so it can bring some contaminants also. Variable composition, it's expensive, and regulatory issues are there. And so it has to be one. Sometimes we use as a heat inactivated one. So destruction of complement immunoglobulins or destruction of some viruses also is required by heat activations. But you have to be very careful when you use it. If you do heat inactivation, you have to be careful, don't overheat. It will damage your proteins and other materials in the culture medium. So this is a very important constituent of the culture medium and has to be used. And is the most expensive component of the cell culture medium. Now coming to the role of glucose and glutamine in the cell. So what glucose and glutamine does? So as you all know, glucose is a source of energy to the cell. So glucose enters into the cell, and then glucose also helps in the formation of nucleic acid, helps in the formation of proteins. And glucose leads to the formation of pyruvic acid also. So after during the process of respiration, pyruvic acid is produced, and that is enters a TCA cycle through acetyl-CoA, etc. And then it enters the cycle, TCA cycle, and ultimately from this cycle we get alanine and lactate are produced. While if you use glutamine, they have almost similar function. They also produce nucleic acid, proteins, etc. But they enter directly into the cell like glutamine, and they form the alpha-glutic glutarate, and they also takes part in the TCA cycle. But in turn, they gives out ammonia. So after this addition of glutamine and glucose, the net output is lactate, alanine, and ammonia is given by the cell. But glutamine, as you can see here, also helps in the production of energy because it helps in the entry in the TCA cycle. So this becomes the source of energy as well. So supports growth of cells having high energy demand and synthesize large amount of proteins and nucleic acids. It alters the source of energy for rapidly dividing cells. So this is how this continues to grow. And now if you see in a cell, there is one important phenomenon that occurs in a cell. Two processes occurs in a cell, and glycolysis and glutaminolysis. So glycolysis is the process from glucose to formation of pyruvate or pyruvic acid is produced. This is the glycolysis. And then it enters a TCA cycle. And another method is there where the glutamine breaks down to alpha-glutic glutarate and participates in the TCA cycle. The goal of both of glycolysis and glutaminolysis are same. They both tries to enter the TCA cycle and produce a large amount of energy. So in normal cell, normal conditions, the glycolysis and glutaminolysis occur simultaneously. If your media contains glutamine, so glutaminolysis will occur and glycolysis will occur in the cells. But what happens in the cancerous cells? In the cancerous cells, the glutaminolysis is very high. Why the glutaminolysis is very high? Because these cells fails to utilize glucose properly. So they cannot utilize glucose properly. As a result of it, incomplete oxidation of glucose through glycolysis pathway, even in the presence of oxygen. That means it takes more towards the aerobic glycolysis, and this is called the Warburg effect. So Warburg effect is that in which a cancer cell fails to utilize the glucose properly and thus leading to the cell death or less efficient energy system. So pyruvate generated from above converted lactate rather than being used in the TCA cycle. So then how the cell manages it out? To maintain functional TCA cycle, cancer cells rely on the elevated glutamine lysis. So if your cell culture media contains glutamine, so cancer cells will utilize that more efficiently than, so that means they will take the glutamine out and then they put the TCA cycle rather than using the glucose for its source of energy. So that means cancer cell follows this glutaminolysis pathway more than the glycolysis pathway. So, so when you see this, so this is the normal cells. Take the glucose, glycolysis occurs, pyruvic acid is produced, lactic acid molecules are produced in the lack of oxygen. But if the oxygen is there, acetyl-CoA is produced, and then it enters the Krebs cycle or TCA cycle, and then ultimately producing a large number of ATP molecules, 38 ATP molecules produced. But in cancerous cells, they cannot undergo the TCA cycle; they produce lactic acids. So naturally, the energy demand is only 2 ATP molecules are produced, but this is not enough for the survival of the cells. So naturally, they depends more on the glutamine concentration. So if the glutamine is there, they can utilize glutamine by glutaminolysis process, and that's how they can survive and continue to proliferate. And this is called the Warburg effect. That means where the cancer cell fails to utilize the glucose properly, and then it can survive only on the glutamine or other source of energy for the cells. So when you culture these cells, so we can primary culture cells proliferate, series of subcultures, continuous cell lines, and senescence and cell death occurs. So senescence of the cell death occurs because of the telomere reduction. As you all know, when the cells continuously divides, the telomeric ends become shorter, and once it becomes shorter, the ultimate cells will die. So why some batches of cells grow continuously? Because they undergo immortalization and transformation, and they undergo genetic changes. So without genetic changes, cells divide about 50 passage, that means, and then stop. So what is this passaging is? So this is the passaging of the cells are here. So you can see this is entire process called the passaging. So this is where you have a confluent monolayer of cells being cultured, and then after that, when this cell plate culture flask is full, as you all know, this is by the contact inhibition is there, and so resistivity inhibition is there, the cells will not grow anymore. If you don't change any media or change these cells, so they will die. So what you do? So to this culture medium, remove this medium, and then you wash these cells with PBS and EDTA. Why this PBS EDTA used? As you all know, EDTA is a chelating agent which will remove the calcium from this culture medium, and if calcium is removed out here, the cells become free and from the matrix as well as from cell attachments. So to this you add trypsin. Trypsin is an enzyme which actually breaks the intercellular bonds. So if the intercellular bonds are broken down, the cells become free. So cells are free from the matrix, and you can see the cells starts to round up and they become free cells. So they're not adherent to the matrix anymore. Now if you take to these cells, if you add the fresh medium, so the cells are now free and they're adherent. So now you can seed these cells to a new culture flask, and then incubate at 37 temperature. After some time, the cells will adhere here, and then after adhering, so they will try to start to grow, and then within 7 days, the plates become full, the culture flask become full again. Now you proceed for the understream. So each time you follow the entire cycle, we give a cell a number called passage number. So if I do it one time, I say passage number 1. So once the plate becomes full like this, I repeat the step again and then come back to this stage. After 7 days, passage number 2. Again, I do the same procedure, and so each time I do this is called subculturing, or in other words, it's called passaging also. It's called passage. So this is given a number. So any cell that you receive from any commercial source or whenever you culture your cells, you have to give a number called passage number, and passage number indicates the number of time the cell has been subcultured. So this passage number indicates how many times your cell has been subcultured in the process. So that is called the passage number. So this is how cells before trypsination, they are adherent to the matrix. As soon as you add trypsin to the cells, you can see they have started rounding up. They are free from the matrix and they are free from each other also. Now if I add fresh medium and then I seed the cells back to another fresh culture flask, they'll start to grow, and soon they will become like this. That's how the cells trypsination is done in the culture environment. So now I have finished the basic techniques. So I will now quickly go through some techniques that we generally use in my lab for routine purposes. So you'll get an idea that how we can use the cell cultures experiments in different programs. One important assay that we generally do is the MTT assay. So what is MTT? MTT is basically a chemical which is very big name, 3,4,5-dimethyl diphenyltetrazolium bromide. Is basically a chemical, and this is this is taken up by the cells where in the presence of NADPH, the cell oxidizes to this chemical to a formazole, a colored material. So if that means if I see it here, this is a live cell. Now if this live cell is there, so if to this live cell if we add MTT, so MTT goes into the cell, and if it goes to the mitochondria, and then if it is a live cell, so mitochondria will convert this to formazole. But if the cell is dead, there is no NADPH, so this chemical is not converted to formazole. So formazole production is not there. Once the formazole production is there, so more formazole means this colored cells will become more purple colored. So as you can see in my previous slide, so this is more purple. So that means these are the cells which are more viable as compared to those cells which do not give any purple color. These cells are not very viable, or they are the dead cells. So if you grow these cells, then add this chemical to the cells, and if you get this sort of color, your cells are viable, are more active, are living cells. If the cells do not give any color, the cells are basically dead cells. So this is how we do the MTT assay regularly. This is used for screening of drugs like anti-cancer drug, which is supposed to kill the cells. So if your drug is active, so it will kill large number of cells, and if your drug is not active, it will not kill the cells. This is one of the assays that we generally do. Second assay that we do is basically actinium orange ethidium bromide staining. This is a combination of two dyes. Actinium orange is an organic compound, and it interacts with DNA by intercalation or RNA by electrostatic attractions. And now it gives, although name is orange, but it gives imparts an green color to the cell. Cell looks green if I see at 421 nanometer color. Now, if we add this dye with ethidium bromide, so ethidium bromide actually stains the dead cells. It goes inside the dead cells and gives a red color. So now, what is the principle? If I have live cells, and then if I treat them with actinium ethidium bromide fluorescence microscope and CLM fluorescence microscope, this is the healthy cells. So this actinium orange goes inside the cells, and then if the cell starts to die out, then ethidium bromide goes into the cell. Then the cell starts to be red, and this dead cell. And if it is dead cell, actinium orange will not go into the cell. Only this ethidium bromide goes into the cell. The cell is all the time dead, and it's necrotic cells. So by seeing the combination of green and red cells, we can say that the cell is viable or not the viable cell. So this is an example. This is an MCF cell. This is breast cancer cells. And we have a drug, PTR-ITC. PTR is a drug. PTR-ITC is a drug that we have in our lab. So these are normal cells. So this is the treated cells with one drug, 60 micromolar, and this is another drug, dead cells. Now, when you have these cells here, so if you see these cells, and then if this is control cells, the cell death is very less. So cell death is very less here. Now, if you treat the cells with drug, you can see the green cells are there because, as you all know, actinium orange goes to both live and dead cells, but ethidium bromide goes only to the dead cells. So you can see ethidium bromide cell number is more. Red cells are there more. If I merge them together, this and these merge, so you can see large number of dead and live cells. So this is again the drug. So you can see this is a green cell, actinium orange stained cells. Then it's same cells stained with ethidium bromide, and when you merge them together, you can see large population of red cells. The red cells indicate the dead cells. Same thing with PC3 prostate cancer cell line. These normal cells. This is normal cells, and then with the dry drugs, actinium orange stain, ethidium bromide stain, and then you can merge them. You can see large number of. So more number of red cells means more of cell death. And this is another example where you can see the DNA ladder, because this is basically done by the breakdown of the DNA. And as you all know, once we do it, so you can the control cells, no DNA breakage, but with PTR-ITC treatment, the cell, this is a treatment, you can see the DNA fragmentation occurs. So apoptosis, in these cases, what we saw, there was a DNA degradation occurred. So this also you can see that these drugs actually causing the DNA degradation. This is called the DNA ladder formation. So this is also one way you can show the cell function. One more important thing, what we do is the autophagic process. So autophagy, as you all know, is a cell destruction process, and cells destroyed out. So you can see here, when the cell organs or different organs of the cell are starting to be old, they are degraded out in the cell. So once they have to degrade out, how they degrade it, this is by the process called autophagy. So this involves a protein, LC3B protein, and then they form an autophagosome. This LC3B protein combines from the autophagosomes, and these autophagosomes fuse with the lysosomes, and then this autophagolysosome combination is produced. And in this case, after this process is complete, so all the organs are degraded out, and this protein, LC3B protein, dissociates, and P62, another component part of this autophagolysosome, is also degraded out in the cell. This is the entire process of autophagy process. How you can show it in a cell? So you can see two important proteins plays a very critical role: LC3B protein and P62 proteins in the autophagic process. So now what we did, we took cells like this is LC3 proteins, and this is fused with a GFP protein. So this is a fused protein. So wherever this protein combination goes into a cell, it will start to get fluorescence. So this is a plasmid that we took and we gave it to a cell, and then after this cells, this is basically a general method of making stable cell line. So once this DNA goes into the cell, now you do an antibiotic selection. All the cells who did not take the DNA, they will die, and those cells who took the DNA, they will survive. And those cells are cryopreserved, and you can see day 2, day 7, day 15, the cell population is gradually increasing, and the fluorescence of the cells is increasing because this plasmid is containing GFP. So we took the 30-day cells, and then we cultured the cells like passage 1, 10, 30. We continue to culture them in the culture system. So you can see the cell number is gradually increasing, and so till passage 30, the cells are still fluorescing. That means this protein is getting expressed in the cell. So we took these passage 3 cells and did our experiment. So you can see here, this is very typical experiment that we generally do. So what happens in these cells? So you can see here. So this is basically a cell, transfected cell with GFP-LC3, that's a stable cell that you have made. So in normal condition, this remains in the cytoplasm. So that's what you see. In the normal condition, they remain in the cytoplasm. But if you induce autophagy to these cells, so this LC3 protein will go and bind to the autophagosomes. So that's autophagosomes where this LC3, these proteins are going and binding. And this is how you can see dotted structure. So cytoplasmic distribution becomes dotted structure. So they become dotted. And then with further increase in time, so you can see this dot-like structure produces, and this is called the LC3 puncta. Puncta-like structure means they elongated structure like this. So more of these punctured structures means dotted structures are there. We can say the autophagy is taking place. Now, if I prevent this, say for the pymetic acid is a chemical which prevents the autophagic process, or DSA normal condition when the autophagy is not there, you see the whole cytoplasm is green. But if we like camphorol is there a chemical, or temistolol is a synthetic drug which induces autophagy, you can see those fluorescence is gone. So it is forming a dotted structure which has puncta like structures formation in cytoplasm, indicating the autophagy is going on in the cell. Just by seeing the fluorescence under a microscope, you can say the fluorescence that you can say that the autophagy is going inside the cell or not. So if you want to screen a drug, whether it can cause autophagy or not, so this is one of the very important model where you can test your drug. So to test if the autophagy is taking place just by seeing the cells under fluorescence microscope, you can get this nice information. So this is how you can do. So one another experiment is what we did is that we had androgen receptor, as you all know, is a protein which is steroid receptor. So we had androgen receptor fused with GFP protein. Now, in normal condition, this remains in the cytoplasm. Now, in the absence of any ligand, which is DHT. As soon as an ligand for this particular receptor, this complex migrates to the nucleus. So this is in the nucleus. You can see the cytoplasmic constituents has migrated to the nucleus. So now we have tested our drugs here. So you can see our drug. We are saying the drug does not allow this receptor to migrate to the nucleus. So you can see with our drug, the nucleus is black. The whole cytoplasm is green. So that's what we could show that our drug was inhibiting the receptor in the cytoplasm, not allowing it to go to the nucleus. So you can see here, by these simple experiments, by transfecting the cells with this particular construct, you could say whether the drug is active or inactive, or the drug is inducing the receptor function or not. So this is what one simple experiment we did. And the simple experiment that we generally do is the cell migration assay. So if you see the cell migration assay means this is a scratch assay. So what we do, this is a cell growing in the culture, and you make a scratch on its surface, and scratch is produced. And when the scratch is produced, so now you leave this scratch like this. Now, in response to it, so naturally, what will happen if you don't add anything here? These cells will proliferate from both the sides, and then they will gradually fill the space. So like in this case, you can see here, in the normal cells, 0 hour we made a scratch. At 12 hour, scratch is slowly filled. 24 hours, scratch is completely filled. But now again, estradiol is a drug. This was basically for the Hubeck cells, which induces the cell proliferation. So scratch was made. If you add estradiol, it fills the space and completes the space. But if you have some drugs which prevents this action like this, so you can the space continue. So with our drug, you can see the space is not filled. That means it prevents the proliferation of the cell. That means if I could say my drug is inhibiting the cell migration, and that was inhibiting the filling of the wound or the space created. This is called the wound healing assay, or this is generally used for seeing the cell migration properties. So this is another similar type of study where you can see the cells are grown in two different chambers, upper chamber and lower chamber. So you can see here UVEX cells are grown in the upper chamber. Now, if these cells are highly proliferative and highly invasive, so they will invest down to the lower chambers. So this is how they are traveling to the lower chambers. Now I want to see how many of the cells from the upper chamber has migrated to the lower chambers. So if my drug prevents, so this is basically a tendency of any metastatic cell to migrate from one layer to another layer. If they will penetrate this layer and come there. So if I want to see my drug is anti-metastatic, so it will prevent this migration. So that means less number of cells migrating means my drug is anti-metastatic in nature. So what we do, you count the cells in the upper chamber and in the lower chamber. If a drug is positive for, say, for example, control cells, the cells don't migrate. But if you induce some with some drug, estradiol, which is an carcinogenic agent, it will induce large number of cells migrating. So if I take these cells and count it out, you see the whole plate is full of cells. But with our drugs, when you add a drug, the number of cells migration is much lesser as compared to this estradiol case. That means my drug inhibited the migration of cells from this chamber to the other chamber. So this is how you can test. This is called the Transwell assay, where you can use it for testing the cells migration or the proliferative properties. So we do another experiment also. Anjali, my time is up. Should I stop here? Hello?
Sir, you may continue.
I
Sir,
just need
we
another
have-
5 minutes.
Okay, sir. Sir, we have a few queries as well.
Okay, fine. So I'll just take another 5 minutes. And
Yeah,
then
sure,
close it or-
sir. Sure, sir.
Okay. So just the last model I am showing. So we work on bone remodeling. So how we are the bone remodeling? So say for example, these are the normal condition. They are the bone cells called osteoblasts. Now bone undergo remodeling every time. So who does it? Osteoclast cells. So osteoclast cells are there. So these cells are there. So now what will happen? So osteoclast cells will destroy these osteoblast cells, and so naturally a space is created, and then they are filled up by the pre-osteoblast cells, osteoblast cells, and then this will mature, and then they will form the final matured cells. So these cells will be filled. So these are the osteoblast cells. They will differentiate to osteoblast, and that's a new bone is formed. So bone is all the time undergoing this remodeling system. So osteoclast has a very important role in remodeling, but if it is too much of osteoclast cells, then the bone becomes porous or porosity will occur. So we want to see some drugs which has got these properties. So now what happens in this process? So if you see a drug is there called RANK. So receptor activation of nuclear factor kappa, RANK is basically a ligand as identified as the primary mediator of osteoclast formation. If there is a more of osteoclast formation, then the bone degeneration occurs. So osteoporosis, pleochondritis, hypercalcemia, cancer metastasis to bones, everything is caused by hyperactivation of the osteoclasts. So in that case, RANK is activating the osteoclast activity. So if any drug is there which can inhibit the osteoclast formation, so naturally this is a good drug which can prevent osteoporosis, which can prevent bone metastasis. So that is what. So excessive bone resorption leads to imbalancing of bone remodeling and lead to all these diseases. So we work on these aspects also. You can see here. This is basically a cell. Raw cells are basically a model which represents the osteoclast models. So in the absence of ligand, RANKL, the cells are growing. Now, if you add RANKL, you can see the cells become red. So this red color indicates the cell has become more towards the osteoclastic in nature. So osteoclastic nature. So that means the cells are osteoclastic. So because as I just now told you, this is a ligand for this one. So this is there. So now after this, if I add my drugs there, you can see this my drug is added. Because the red color is gone. So very less red color. So this is inhibiting the osteoclast function or osteoclast proliferation. So we can treat with this is basically trap. This is called the trap assay, which trap resistant assay, which is a staining, normal staining, grow the cells and then stain the cells, and then by seeing the staining of patterns, you can count how many of your cells are stained, how many of them are not stained, and based on that, you can decide that okay, my drug is preventing osteoclast proliferation or not. That means if your drug is preventing osteoclast generation, that means your drug is very good for bone formation or bone regeneration process. So sometimes we do the co-culture system also. Like you can see, this is a breast cancer cell, MDMB6, and this cell is known to metastasize to bone. So now, when we do this, when we do this co-culture system, so this is a co-culture. So when you do this co-culture system, so this is a raw cell, which is basically an osteoclast cells. Now, what happened? This co-culture system, these cells actually when you culture these cells, MDMB2C cells with these two together, so these cells will secrete some factors on these cells and induce them to become the osteoclasts. So you can see as these cells are free, so now once we grow these cells, raw cells with these MDMB cells, so these cells secrete some factors which converted these raw cells to an osteoclastic cell. Cells become red. Now, can my drug inhibit this osteoclast formation of the cells? So when I treat with my drug, this red color is gone. With increasing concentration of drug, red color is gone. So this is basically a critical factor here. So now, when you do this type of experiments, you have to understand that this PTRIT is so where you have to show it by the expression of the genes also. Like whether when I am saying that my drug is inhibiting the formation of the osteoclast, is it really true? So I can see TRAP, CTSK, MMP9 are basically the marker for osteoclasts. So you can see with my drug, so Rankel is overexpressing these genes, but once you treat them with the drug, the expression is going down. These were genes at the RT-PCR, at the level of proteins, same thing, JNK, P38 levels are going down in response to this drug. So the osteoclast function is not there. So these cells are not osteoclasts. So my drug is inhibiting the action of MDMB cells to convert these raw cells to become osteoclasts. So you can culture these two cells together, separated by a semi-permeable membrane. So my final slide. So what are the advantages of this cell culture? Finally, advantage is complete control of physical environment or homogeneous system and much less complicated than animal models. And disadvantages need sophistication, small amount of tissues grow at a high cost, dedifferentiation problem is there, and instability and aneuploidy is there. So if we eliminate these disadvantages, so we have more advantages because as I just now showed you, we can use these experiments for different applications and and once we do this, we can still move to the next phase of it, that is the process of animal testing and further preclinical testing. So without this, we'll waste large number of animals. That's why it's a very important aspect of study and in the molecular biology or animal biotechnology or any drug discovery program. This is very important. So thank you everybody. I finish it here. So now I'm ready to take some questions if somebody is interested for that.
Thank
Anjali,
you, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Sir, there are a few questions. Like,
Yes.
I think Mr.
Should
Avinash. Yes, sir.
Should I stop sharing it now? I keep
Yeah,
sharing.
exactly. No, sir. You can just stop it.
I can stop sharing.
Yes, sir. You can stop sharing. Sir, Dr. Amarpal Singh Bhadoria, he wanted to know about the will culture media be different for 2D and 3D culture?
Culture media, yes. So now it depends. If I use for 2D cultures, there are very conventional routine 2D culture media is there. For 3D culture, the culture media will depend. Basically, normal routine culture media will be definitely there. No question in that. DMEM, RPMI, whatever you use. But it will also vary depending on the scaffolds that we use for making the 3D culture. If you are using one sort of 3D culture, so if the polymer is not compatible with that particular media, your media has to be changed. So when you do the 3D culture, you have to take care that the scaffold material is compatible with that media or not, because sometimes it changes the pH, sometimes it makes the media viscous. So you have to take care that they are all taken care. If that is not there, it can be normal media, 2D media and 2D media and 3D media are all same.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, one more question was there from Mr. Avinash.
Yes.
I think it has been covered. Like, what is the role of EDTA in cell culture? So this has been
Yes.
covered in the lecture. So
you want me to explain it once more? No.
Okay, sir.
You want me to explain it?
Sure, sir.
I've already covered it.
You have already covered it, I think, sir. And now Ms. Ranjana Agrawal, she was asking the full form of HUVEX, which has been, I think, she can see like it's human
It is there represented.
umbilical, vein endothelial cells. Like
Vascular
Shashti Sharma, she was asking about how to isolate HUVEX cells again. Could you please explain
Okay.
isolation of HUVEX cells again? So it was not clear.
Okay. So because basically, if you see my presentation, we take the whole of these cord bloods, not the cord blood. We take the whole of these cords out of it, placental portions, and we flush the cells from inside. So you have to close out one end by a clip, and then you just have to put the buffers inside several times, and then continuously flushing it out, and then you press it out to get the free cells out of the
Umbilical.
endothelians portion of endothelial cells out of it.
Okay. Sir, one more question was, how long cell culture can be cryopreserved?
Oh, it can for years, 5 years, 10 years, provided you keep it. You have to decide which phase you are keeping, in the vapor phase or in the gaseous phase, in the liquid phase. Because in the liquid tank there are two phases. One is the vapor, upper portion is vapor, lower is the liquid portion. So if you put in the liquid portion, probably your lifespan will be much longer. If in the vapor phase, it is little bit less. But 5-10 years is very easily can.
Thank you, sir. So one more short query, like, is it possible to convert any of the cell lines into de-differentiated form, or only a few can be done?
No, it depends actually. De-differentiation is a very uncontrolled process. So generally in the in vitro condition, cells get de-differentiated by deformation, because when it happens for in vitro culture condition, it is a problem, because if you do not maintain the proper conditions of the cell culture media, etc., your cells will undergo de-differentiation. Like if you don't change, if your media changes, media pH is changed, osmolarity is changed, other factors are changed, naturally the cells will move towards de-differentiation. De-differentiation, if it goes back to the original form, it's fine. But if it's differentiate, or it undergoes cell death, then that is a problem for you. So if you want to de-differentiate in your way, yes, there are different methods of doing de-differentiation also. We have different factors which can convert the cells back to the progenitor conditions, which is quite complicated process, because directing the cells to a particular lineage is always a difficult issue. Yes, you can do that, definitely.
Okay. Sir, Miss Amrita Pandey, she wanted to know, like, sir, please tell the difference between de-differentiation and trans-differentiation.
Okay, very good question. Actually, de-differentiation means, so you have a differentiated cell, functional cell, and then it de-differentiates to a progenitor condition or early condition. What is that condition? In which the cell loses its property. That's why I gave you the example sarcomere. Sarcomeric proteins are there, MyoD, etc. Proteins are expressed in those cells. Now, when it gets de-differentiated, it comes to a situation that is it loses, or it stops expressing those proteins, and it starts to express the proteins which are basically the proliferating proteins. So the cells is proliferating proteins. Now, this is what? Now this is the de-differentiation process. And so one after this, the cell can differentiate back to its original form. That means if it was sarcomere, then it becomes de-differentiated to proliferating cell, then it becomes sarcomere again. This is called differentiation back. So no issue in that. Transdifferentiation means instead of becoming sarcomere, it becomes hepatocytes, it becomes pancreatic cells, or it becomes some other epithelial cells. That is called transdifferentiation. That means the cell differentiates to another lineage. That is called the transfer of differentiation process. It becomes something else. Typical example is, like, if you take the acinar cell of the pancreas. Acinar cell means a cluster of cells which are then the pancreatic beta cells, and acinar cells then differentiates to insulin secreting cells. So acinar cells do not secrete insulin, but after transdifferentiation, those cells start to secrete insulin. So this is called transdifferentiation. So that is the difference between transdifferentiation means you will differentiate to something different lineage, while de-differentiation is a process in which the cell loses its property of differentiated property and reverts back to its other progenitor or early proliferating conditions. So transdifferentiation is differentiated condition, but de-differentiation is an undifferentiated condition.
Okay. Sir, can we have one more last question? Like, we have a long list of questions, but we will give reply.
Give me all questions. If you have time, you can give me. Very happy to answer them.
Sir, we will reply them through mail. Okay, it's okay. Sir, one more question. Mr. Deep Singh, he was asking, cancer cell is immortal. Can we make animal cell immortal? It's an interesting question, I guess. And why aging is not stopped in animal cell? Two questions he has put.
Yeah. So this is very interesting, which I did not wanted to make a public comment like that. You have to always remember, nothing in this world is immortal. So even the cancer cells also dies. But the problem is the rate of proliferation of the cancer, even before it dies, it makes hundreds of other cells before it dies. That's why the population is always higher toward the higher side. So that means if we have a cancer cell population, that is when I say infinite cells, have to understand one very important thing. Nothing is infinite in this world. That cell also will die. But they are, before they die, they will have multiple copies of it. So cancer cells also have a, so you cannot continue culturing a cancer cell line for years and years. After some point of time, they will start proliferating. So why this is so? Because they also undergo senescence and all these processes that a normal cell undergoes. But difference is, if a normal cell grows for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, or if I talk in terms of passage, 10 passage, 15 passage, 20, 300, 30 or 50 passage, but the cancer cell will live for about 500 passage. So 50 passage and 500 passage. So in that respect, it is infinite. But as such, the cell is basically basically it will die. So nothing is immortal in this one. So we can make them live long. So if you modify the cells, so there are different methods. If you put them is like AZ40T antigen gene transfer to any normal cells, they become transformed. So they will become infinite cells like that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, your lecture was very informative, and the best part was like you covered the basic concepts. So I
Yes.
know you personally as a teacher, as a researcher, and I think like it's very difficult to get a good researcher and a good teacher in single person. But you are an
No.
example, and you proved it again in your presentation. On YouTube link, we had very good comments regarding your lectures, and I will share it with you. And sir,
Thank you,
thanking you again, sir, for sparing so much time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anjali. Take care. All the
And,
best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity itself.
No, sir, it was my pleasure, sir. It was our pleasure. So you can disconnect it from the Google Meet. I have to interact with the participants regarding the quiz. Okay, thank you, sir.